What if I told you that North America was once home to cities with populations rivaling medieval Paris? Cities that were abandoned centuries before Columbus arrived. What if I told you that while the Roman Empire was conquering the Mediterranean and Christ was walking the earth, North American civilizations were building monumental centers with mathematical precision that rivals ancient Egypt? And what if I told you that for over a century, the archaeological establishment has been dismissing and downplaying evidence of these achievements? The proof is in peer-reviewed journals, government archaeological reports, and decades of excavation data. All sources that I've compiled and will reference throughout this video, and listed in the description below. This isn't a speculation. This is all documented archaeological evidence that challenges directly what you learned in school about ancient America. I'm Alex Arnold, and welcome back to Arnie's Brain Train, where we like to dive into controversial topics that some people might find problematic or offensive. Fair warning, I am going to use terms like lost civilizations, and we're going to discuss archaeological evidence that challenges certain narratives, and I know that's going to ruffle some feathers. I'm not claiming to have all the answers, but I am presenting evidence from legitimate archaeological sources that the establishment would rather have you not think too hard about. And you'll probably notice some AI-generated images mixed in with stock footage throughout the video. Sorry, not sorry if that triggers you. This is a fun, informational deep dive into a controversial topic backed by real academic research, not a peer-reviewed journal article. Today we're going to be examining the archaeological cover-up of ancient America using evidence from actual archaeologists, published studies, and official reports. We're going to explore cities that predate Christ, trade networks that spanned continents, and engineering that required mathematical precision, all documented in the sources that you can verify yourself in the description below. If you want to see me tackle more controversial topics like this one, regardless of who it might offend, hit that subscribe button and help me grow this channel into something truly special. But for now, buckle up and let's get into it. Let's start with Cahokia. This city was located near present-day St. Louis, Missouri, and during the year 1050 CE, it was actually larger than London. According to Dr. Timothy Palkatau's groundbreaking work, Cahokia, Ancient America's Great City on the Mississippi, this metropolis housed between 15,000 to 20,000 people at its peak, making it the largest settlement north of Mexico until Philadelphia surpassed it in the 1780s. Think about that. America's first megacity existed 700 years before Europeans arrived, and it was abandoned and forgotten long before Columbus was even born. Now, the urban planning at Cahokia was super sophisticated. The city was laid out in a grid pattern with a massive central plaza that could hold thousands of people for ceremonies and gatherings. Monk's Mound, the centerpiece of the city, contains 22 million cubic feet of earth, making it larger by volume than the Great Pyramid of Giza. This wasn't some accidental pile of dirt. This was precision engineering that required advanced mathematical knowledge and the coordination of thousands of workers over decades. But Cahokia wasn't alone. The Mississippian culture, which flourished from roughly 800 to 1600 CE, built dozens of urban centers across the American Southeast and Midwest. Spiral Mounds in Oklahoma, Moundville in Alabama, and Etowah in Georgia were all major population centers with sophisticated social hierarchies, long-distance trade networks, and monumental earthwork architecture that required thousands of coordinated workers. Here's what gets me. These weren't simple agricultural villages with a few storage pits just built in. Archaeological evidence shows that they had specialized craft production, pottery workshops, copper working facilities, stone tool manufacturing centers. They also had social stratification with elite burials containing exotic goods from across the continent. Shell from the Gulf Coast, copper from Lake Superior, obsidian from Yellowstone, and exotic materials from as far away as Mexico flowed through these urban centers like medieval European trade routes. The scale of trade was staggering. At Spiral Mounds alone in Oklahoma, archaeologists have found conch shells from Florida, copper from the Great Lakes, and turquoise from the American Southwest. This was so much more than local bartering. This was a continental commerce system that required organized merchants, standardized exchange systems, and sophisticated logistics. Yet, when European explorers first encountered these regions, they found mostly abandoned ruins and scattered populations. What happened? Where did these thriving civilizations go? And more importantly for our story today, how far back does this urban tradition really go? Now here's where things actually start to get controversial. While academia grudgingly acknowledges Mississippian cities, they get incredibly uncomfortable when we start talking about even older urban centers. Enter Poverty Point, Louisiana, a UNESCO World Heritage Site that most Americans have never even heard of. Dating to approximately 1500 BCE, that's 3,500 years ago, Poverty Point was a massive earthwork complex covering 345 acres. According to research published in American Antiquity by Dr. John Gibson, this site required an estimated 15.5 million hours of coordinated labor to construct. To put that in perspective, if you had 1,000 people working full-time, it would take them over 7 years to build. That's not a small village project. That's urban-scale organization and planning. The site consists of 6 concentric C-shaped earthwork ridges, some over 6 feet tall and 150 feet wide, along with several massive mounds. The largest mound, Mound A, is 72 feet tall and contains an estimated 15.5 million cubic feet of soil. For comparison, that's about half the volume of the Great Pyramid of Giza, built 1,000 years before the supposed first cities emerged in the Americas. But here's what makes archaeologists uncomfortable: the sophisticated engineering. These earthworks show evidence of advanced astronomical alignments, precise geometric planning, and construction techniques that required complex mathematical understanding. The ridges are perfectly aligned to solar and lunar events. The spacing between ridges follows precise geometric ratios. This wasn't built by simple hunter-gatherers stumbling around with digging sticks. This was urban civilization in North America, contemporary with the height of ancient Egypt. And the trade networks? They were extensive. Poverty Point was essentially the New York City of the ancient world. Archaeological evidence shows trade connections stretching 1,000 miles in every direction. They were importing stone from as far away as the Appalachian Mountains, copper from the Great Lakes, and exotic materials from across the continent. This required organized merchant classes, standardized weights and measures, and sophisticated transportation networks. On top of all this, radiocarbon dating and recent LiDAR surveys suggest the Poverty Point culture might be even older than previously thought, potentially pushing back the dates of North American urbanization by centuries. Some researchers are now suggesting that complex societies in North America might date back 4,000 years or more. So, you want to know why this information matters? Because understanding the true scope of ancient American civilizations completely changes how we view human development, cultural exchange, and the sophistication of indigenous societies. This is such a big deal that it's rewriting the story of human civilization itself. Every time we discover another ancient American city, we're forced to confront the fact that our textbooks got it fundamentally wrong. Now let's dive into the period that really challenges everything you think you know about ancient America. The millennium spanning from 700 BCE to 300 CE. While the Roman Republic was conquering the Mediterranean and Christ was walking the earth, North American civilizations were building some of their most impressive urban centers. Let's start with the Adena culture, which flourished in the Ohio River Valley from approximately 800 BCE to 100 CE. Now, most textbooks will tell you that the Adena were simple woodland peoples who built a few burial mounds. Well, that's academic code for we don't want to admit that they had complex urban centers. The reality is far more impressive. The Adena built massive earthwork complexes that required coordinated labor forces numbering in the thousands. The Great Serpent Mound in Ohio, built around 300 BCE, is over 1,300 feet long and perfectly aligned to astronomical events. This isn't a simple burial site. This is sophisticated ceremonial architecture that rivals anything built in Europe at the same time. Something of note, Recent LiDAR surveys of Ohio have revealed that the Adena earthworks are part of massive interconnected complexes covering thousands of square miles. We're not talking about isolated mounds. We're talking about urban landscapes with residential areas, ceremonial centers, and agricultural zones, all connected by raised earthwork roads. The Adena trade networks were equally impressive. Archaeological evidence shows that they were importing materials from across North America: copper from Lake Superior, mica from North Carolina, obsidian from Yellowstone, and marine shells from both the Atlantic and Gulf coasts. Then we have the Hopewell culture, which emerged around 100 BCE and reached its peak between 1 CE and 400 CE, exactly during the height of the Roman Empire. The Hopewell built some of the most geometrically sophisticated earthworks ever constructed anywhere in the world. Take Newark Earthworks in Ohio, built around 100 CE. This complex covers over 4 square miles and includes perfectly circular enclosures, octagonal structures, and connecting causeways that demonstrate advanced mathematical knowledge. The Great Circle has a diameter of 1,200 feet and is perfectly round, a feat of engineering that required precise surveying techniques and mathematical calculations. But here's what stands out. The Hopewell earthworks incorporate sophisticated astronomical alignments that track the 18.6-year lunar calendar. The octagonal enclosure at Newark is aligned to the moon's maximum northern rising position, while the connected circular enclosure tracks the moon's maximum southern position. This level of astronomical knowledge rivals anything achieved by contemporary civilizations in Europe or Asia. The scale of Hopewell society was massive. Archaeological surveys have identified over 10,000 Hopewell sites across the eastern United States. We're talking about a cultural sphere that stretched from the Atlantic to the Rocky Mountains, and from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. This wasn't a small regional culture. This was a continental civilization. And since we keep mentioning the trade networks, yes, theirs were extensive too. Hopewell sites contain grizzly bear teeth from the Rocky Mountains, copper from Lake Superior, mica from the Appalachians, obsidian from Yellowstone, and marine shells from both coasts. But they were also importing silver from Ontario, lead from Missouri, and even had possible contact with Mesoamerican civilizations based on shared iconographic elements. But wait, there's one more I want to talk about, and it's way older. Let's talk about the Watson Brake culture in Louisiana, which recent dating suggests that it was active from 3500 BCE to 2800 BCE. These earthworks predate Stonehenge by over 1,000 years and represent some of the earliest evidence of monumental architecture in North America. The Watson Brake site consists of 11 earthen mounds connected by ridges forming an oval pattern nearly 1,000 feet across. Recent archaeological analysis shows evidence of planned urban layouts, specialized craft production, and long-distance trade networks. This pushes back the timeline of American urbanization by millennia. So why don't more people know about these incredible civilizations? Why do textbooks still teach that North America was sparsely populated by nomadic tribes before European contact? The answer is uncomfortable but necessary: systematic academic bias and institutional resistance to evidence that doesn't fit the colonial narrative. Dr. Charles Mann addresses this directly in his book, 1491 New Revelations of the Americas Before Columbus. He documents how 20th century archaeologists consistently downplayed evidence of large-scale settlements, complex societies, and advanced engineering in the Americas. The reasons were both academic and political. First, there's what anthropologists call the pristine wilderness myth, the idea that the Americas were largely uninhabited before Europeans arrived. This myth served colonial and later American interests by justifying land seizure and minimizing the scale of indigenous genocide. If Native Americans were just scattered hunters living in harmony with nature, then European civilization was bringing progress to an empty continent. Honestly, the numbers tell a different story. Modern demographic studies suggest that the pre-Columbian population of North America was between 5 and 15 million people, not the 1 million figure taught in schools for decades. Dr. Henry Dobbins' research indicates that some regions had population densities comparable to contemporary Europe. Second reason, there's this deeply ingrained academic hierarchy that places the Old World civilizations as the template for real civilization. Cities must look like Mesopotamian or Egyptian cities. Writing systems must look like cuneiform or hieroglyphics. Social organization must mirror European feudalism. When American civilizations developed differently, using earthworks instead of stone, oral traditions instead of written records, different forms of social organization, they were dismissed as pre-civilizational. This bias runs deep. When the Smithsonian Institution was cataloging Native American artifacts in the 19th century, they systematically destroyed or hid evidence that didn't fit their narrative of primitive peoples. Dr. Cyrus Thomas, in his official government report on mound builders, concluded that the sophisticated earthworks must have been built by a lost race, rather than acknowledging Native American achievements. Dr. Stephen Lexon, in A History of the Ancient Southwest, documents how Southwestern archaeology consistently minimized evidence of large-scale settlements and complex societies. When Pueblo Bonito in Chaco Canyon was found to have over 600 rooms and sophisticated astronomical alignments, it was described as a great house, rather than acknowledging it as a part of an urban center. The resistance still continues today. When LiDAR technology revealed massive earthwork complexes across the Amazon, showing evidence of sophisticated pre-Columbian societies supporting millions of people, the academic response was muted at best. These discoveries should have been front-page news worldwide. Instead, they were buried in specialized journals. Here's a specific example that demonstrates the pattern: the Kensington Runestone controversy. When a stone with apparent Viking runes was discovered in Minnesota in 1898, suggesting pre-Columbian European contact, it was immediately dismissed by academics as a fake. But recent geological and linguistic analysis suggests that it might be authentic. Yet, the academic establishment refuses to reconsider their position because it challenges too many established narratives. They even try to dismiss things as solid as genetic evidence. When DNA studies revealed that some Native American populations carry genetic markers suggesting ancient European ancestry, possibly supporting theories of Ice Age transatlantic contact, the findings were either ignored or explained away rather than integrated into our understanding of American prehistory. So here's the thing. While mainstream archaeology grudgingly accepts that places like Cahokia and Poverty Point represent complex societies, they maintain strict limits on how far back they'll push the timeline of American urbanism. But so many new discoveries are constantly shattering those timelines. At Watson Break in Louisiana, as I mentioned earlier, archaeologists have found earthwork mounds dating to 3500 BCE, making them older than Stonehenge and contemporary with the earliest Egyptian pyramids. That's 5,500 years of continuous mound building tradition in North America. But even Watson Break might not be the beginning. Recent excavations at sites like Corral in Peru have revealed urban centers dating to 3500 to 1800 BCE, with sophisticated urban planning, monumental architecture, and complex social organization. The question isn't whether ancient Americans could build cities, it's how far back this tradition actually goes. Here's where things start to get really interesting. The Monteverde site in Chile has yielded evidence of human occupation dating to at least 14,500 years ago, thousands of years before the supposed Clovid I migration. If humans were in South America 15,000 years ago, what were they doing in North America during those millennia? Dr. Dennis Stafford's controversial Solutrean hypothesis suggests that European peoples may have reached North America during the Ice Age, potentially 20,000 years ago. While hotly debated, the discovery of Solutrean-style tools in North America and genetic markers linking some Native American populations to European ancestry suggests that the story of American settlement is far more complex than we've been told. These recent genetic studies have revealed multiple waves of migration to the Americas, with some populations showing genetic markers that suggest contact with Polynesian, European, and even possible African populations thousands of years before Columbus. Dr. Connie Mulligan's research at the University of Florida has identified genetic lineages in some Native American populations that appear to derive from ancient European sources. But then, to throw a wrench in all of that, sites like Pedra Furada in Brazil have yielded artifacts that some researchers date to 50,000 years ago or more. While controversial, these findings suggest that human occupation of the Americas might be far older than anyone imagined. And then, of course, there's the mystery of the Clovis points themselves. These sophisticated stone tools appear suddenly in the archaeological record around 13,000 years ago, with no apparent developmental sequence in the Americas. The technology appears fully formed, suggesting either rapid innovation or possible importation from elsewhere. Recent underwater archaeology off the coast of both North and South America has revealed submerged sites that suggest coastal populations existed during the Ice Age, when sea levels were much lower. These discoveries hint at sophisticated maritime cultures that might have facilitated transoceanic contact thousands of years before the accepted timeline. Just think about it all this way. We're not trying to just add dates to a timeline. We're trying to recognize the incredible sophistication and achievements of indigenous peoples whose accomplishments have been systematically erased from popular history. We're also opening up possibilities for human contact and cultural exchange that completely rewrite our understanding of ancient history. So if these great cities existed, where did they go? Why were Europeans greeted by scattered populations rather than thriving metropolises? The answer is both tragic and complex, and it reveals patterns that repeat throughout American prehistory. Let's start with disease, because I know everybody has an opinion about that. Well, it did play a massive role, but not in the way that most people think. Yes, Old World diseases devastated Native American populations after 1492. Some estimates suggest that 90% of the indigenous population died from smallpox, measles, and other diseases between 1492 and 1650. But many of these great urban centers were already in decline or completely abandoned centuries before European contact. Take the Hopewell culture, for example. At its peak, around 200 CE, it was a continental civilization with trade networks stretching from coast to coast. But by 400 CE, the culture was in rapid decline. And by 500 CE, most of the great ceremonial centers were abandoned. What happened? Believe it or not, climate change was a major factor. The Roman warm period, approximately 250 BCE to 400 CE, coincided with the height of Hopewell civilization. When global temperatures cooled during the late antique Little Ice Age, 536 to 660 CE, agricultural productivity declined across North America, and many urban centers became unsustainable. But there's another huge factor that's rarely discussed in academic circles, and they hate when you bring it up: warfare and social collapse. Archaeological evidence from multiple sites shows clear signs of increasing violence and social disruption during the decline periods. At the Sunwatch Indian Village in Ohio, archaeological evidence shows that the site was violently destroyed around 1200 CE, with burned structures and scattered human remains suggesting a coordinated attack. Similar evidence exists at dozens of sites across the eastern United States. The Crow Creek site in South Dakota provides perhaps the most shocking evidence. The remains of over 500 individuals showing signs of scalping, dismemberment, and other violence, dating to around 1325 CE. This wasn't a small skirmish. This was systematic warfare that suggests major social upheaval. Here's another noteworthy item. The abandonment patterns aren't random. Many sites show evidence of planned evacuation rather than sudden catastrophe. At Cahokia, for example, there's evidence that the population gradually dispersed over several decades rather than fleeing suddenly. This suggests that climate change and resource depletion might have been bigger factors than warfare in many cases. The abandonment also wasn't always permanent. Many sites show evidence of reoccupation, rebuilding, and cultural continuity. The Mississippian tradition continued in some areas well into the historic period, with sites like Etowah in Georgia showing continuous occupation from 1000 CE to 1550 CE. Archaeological evidence actually suggests that many of these urban populations didn't disappear. They simply dispersed into smaller, more sustainable settlements. The sophisticated trade networks fragmented into regional systems. The monumental architecture was abandoned in favor of more practical village layouts. By the time European explorers arrived, the great urban phase of prehistoric America was largely over, leaving behind only ruins and oral traditions that Europeans either couldn't understand or chose to ignore. But the knowledge wasn't lost. It was preserved in oral histories, ceremonial practices, and cultural traditions that continue to this day. And now we come to the part of the video where I bring everything together and put it in a nice little package for you. What we're looking at isn't just isolated archaeological sites scattered across a sparsely populated continent. It's evidence of a continental civilization system that mainstream academia has systematically ignored, downplayed, or explained away for over a century. From Watson Brake's 5,500-year-old urban planning to the Adena culture's sophisticated earthworks, from the continental trade networks of the Hopewell to Cahokia's medieval metropolis, North America was home to complex urban civilizations for thousands of years. These weren't isolated developments. They represented a continuous tradition of urbanism, monumental architecture, and sophisticated social organization that stretches back to the very dawn of civilization itself. The academic resistance to recognizing these achievements stems from deep-seated biases about what constitutes real civilization, colonial narratives that required portraying the Americas as empty wilderness, and institutional inertia that resists paradigm-shifting discoveries. But the evidence is overwhelming, and it's growing stronger every year. LiDAR technology is revealing massive earthwork complexes hidden beneath forest canopies. Advanced dating techniques are pushing back the timeline of American urbanism by millennia. Genetic studies are revealing complex migration patterns and possible transoceanic contacts that challenge every assumption about ancient America. The implications are significant, to say the least. We're not just talking about adding a few archaeological sites to textbooks. We're talking about fundamentally rewriting the story of human civilization. These discoveries force us to recognize that urban life, monumental architecture, and complex societies developed independently across the globe, and that the Americas were full participants in this process from the very beginning. Well, everybody, that's where we'll end it for today. Thank you so much for joining me. This is exactly the kind of information that challenges comfortable narratives and forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our past. Here on Arnie's Brain Train, I don't shy away from controversial ideas just because they might hurt someone's feelings. I follow the evidence wherever it leads, even when it might demolish everything that we thought we knew about ancient history. If you want to see more of my videos, or if you want to see me dive deeper into these topics, hit that subscribe button and join our Curiosity crew. Check the description below for all the sources I referenced today, and if they're not there, check the pinned comment. I encourage you to do your own research and come to your own conclusions. And finally, what other forbidden or otherwise chapters of history should we explore next? Let me know in the comments below. And remember, the world isn't always this simple, but it's always this interesting. I'm Alex Arnold, and I'll see you on the next stop of Arnie's Brain Train. Bye.